Hello everyone, my name is Protesilaos, also known as Prot. In this video, I want to talk to you about my creative method. I call it alla prima. This is a phrase that comes from the history of painting, and I will tell you how it applies to painting, and then I will tell you how I interpret it for my own affairs. In short, it is a method of creativity to be spontaneous, to be relaxed, and to be authentic. But first, let me introduce you to a story from many years ago when I was at an office job. My role was to be a knowledge worker. I was an expert in a certain niche, and my understanding of my position was that I need to have all the answers to whatever question may be posed with regard to my area of expertise. So, what we would do back then is we would hold working groups to work on whatever was on the agenda. And what I would do is take the program and try, based on that, to anticipate what will unfold at the meeting. What will people talk about exactly? What kind of questions will they ask? And so basically, in my head, I had this elaborate idea of how everything would play out. And based on that, I would do all my homework and I would be prepared to answer all the questions that I had worked out in my head. The times when this plan worked, I was really happy. I did well, I got everything right, fantastic. The times when this didn't work, though, I was feeling stressed. And I was feeling stressed because I was dealing with unknowns. Of course, when you are meeting with people, there is a good chance that something out of the ordinary, something unexpected will happen. Somebody gets a phone call and they are informed about an emergency, and now you have to deal with this emergency instead of what was on the agenda. Or somebody raises a question you had not anticipated. And now you're like, oh, hold on a second. I cannot compute this. I hadn't thought about it before. So if I try to be spontaneous right now to give you an answer, I don't know if it will be a good answer. And so when you are dealing with these unexpected states of affairs, it's much harder to cope with them gracefully if your modus operandi is that of always dealing with the expectable. And so, what I understood the hard way is that at the time, I didn't actually have confidence in my ability. What I did have confidence in, which of course was not real confidence, but what I did have confidence in was in my bet about the future. So I was saying basically that I say this is how things will be. And that's why I will be that way. So I will behave that way. But this is not confidence at all, because you cannot know how things will develop. And if your bet is all you have, that's not good enough. That's not good at all, because the moment where you need to be spontaneous, you are second guessing yourself. You are trapped in your head and you are now thinking that, am I answering it correctly? Is this a satisfactory answer? And if it is not, what is the other person thinking about me right now? And do they know that I am not prepared for this? And if they do notice, do they think that I am a fraud? And so very quickly, you go from this basic state of not knowing the answers, all the answers, because, things just came up out of nowhere, to doubting your very ability to be present in that room. And so you are questioning whether you actually know anything at all. And you are like, am I an imposter? Did I somehow cheat to be here with those people? And that's what's going through your mind. Even though in practice, this cannot be true. In practice, you cannot fool everybody to reach a position where you are an expert and others admit you to their table. But if you are thinking this way, it's very easy to fall into that trap. At the time, I was not this kind of planner for my everyday affairs. In my private life, I was casual, I was relaxed, I was friendly. It was an easygoing life. But at work, it was basically the opposite. It was very stressful. And so, what I started to understand back then is that something is not right. Why am I not the same person at work? Why is professional me basically a different person? Why is professional me trying to prove something? And what is this person trying to prove anyway? Maybe trying to prove that I deserve to be in that position. But if I didn't deserve it, why was I there? I didn't fool anybody. And so, through trial and error, the hard way, as we say, I understood that I was doing it wrong. I understood that I was setting the bar at an unreasonably high level because I was basically misunderstanding what it means to be an expert. I was thinking that to be an expert, you have to have all the answers. But this is nonsense. This is not correct. To be an expert, you have to be able to synthesize new pieces of information, new data points, into an existing corpus of knowledge and derive insights which are consistent with that corpus of knowledge. Furthermore, to be an expert is to know where to look if you want to reference something. It's not that you actually know every single detail. That's why we have computers. And we have databases and we run queries and we get the answers. We don't need to keep all of that in our head. But this simple thing is something that I didn't quite embed in my behavior, in my workflow back then. Of course, I could understand it. I could spell it out. I could reason about it. I could talk about it, yes. But there is a great difference between saying something rationally and actually doing it as your second nature, actually incorporating it in your behavioral patterns. Those two are really different. And that's why I often say what matters is what you do, not what you say. Because what you say, it's really easy. But what you do is really difficult because to actually embed it in your everyday behavior takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of commitment. It's very, very hard. So, what I understood, and of course, I understood it slowly, and I am now providing you the snapshot of it and the gist of it, but back then it was a really slow process. So, what I understood is that I don't need to set these unrealistic standards for myself because all they do is undo me, force me into submission. Because I am not only doubting my ability to meet the standard, let's say that it is about running, okay? And not only am I doubting my ability to run 100 meters in, I don't know, 10 seconds, whatever. I'm not only doubting that, I am doubting my very ability to run. So it was that kind of thing. So it's not that I cannot meet the standard, is that I have nothing to do with the whole field as at large. And so I was like, no, this is not constructive. This all or nothing kind of approach is pernicious. It is detrimental to me. The right approach is to have a standard when it comes to your baseline. Have a standard of the kind of field you are focusing in, and that you basically know the field, but you don't need to know every single answer to every single question. Nobody is going to judge you. And so what I learned is twofold: to bring down the standard to a more realistic level, and to let go of the notion that my performance, my day-to-day performance, is basically the litmus test of my character, of my competence, or what. In other words, when I am doing my job, I am not scrutinized on the question of, are you legitimate or are you a fraud? This binary doesn't exist. And I was like, okay, forget about it. Completely suppress this, forget about it. It's wrong, it is silly. What matters is if you are coping with the evolving states of affairs, and if you are doing it well, if you are doing it gracefully. And then it is totally okay to say, I don't know, but I will figure it out and I will return with a satisfactory answer. That's totally okay, provided you are doing your job well for the rest of the things that you are dealing with. And so, by bringing down the standard to a realistic level, and by letting go of the notion that I am being under the microscope, I am being judged, my moral character is in question, I was able to be more relaxed and more in control. And by being more in control, to no longer have these mini panic attacks of, oh my goodness, the circumstances have changed and I have not planned for them. That's no longer an issue. Okay, the circumstances have changed and I will adapt to them. Because if not me, then who? That's why I am here. This is the idea. And so eventually I was like, this is what I want to do in my life in general. I want to reach a point of lightness, a point where I don't feel that my performance is a testament to my quality as a person, to my worth as a person. Rather, my performance is simply an indication of how good or bad I am at this specific thing that I am doing. And furthermore, what I want from my life is to do what I like in a manner that is authentic, in a manner that is spontaneous on the one hand, but on the other hand, still up to a certain standard of quality. And this is why, for example, the videos I do, I hit the record button, I sit here, I talk, there is no script, there is no video editing, and if I make mistakes, such as mistakes of grammar, I make those frequently, you will see them. If I make errors in judgment, you will know about them. By the way, there was an error right there, okay? I mispronounced the word. You noticed. And that's totally okay, because for me, this doesn't say that, oh, you are a fraud. And for me, this is empowered, because I am like, hey, look, I can talk about something that I actually know. And it is totally okay if I make mistakes. It is totally okay if I don't know it 100%. The greatest in history to ever talk about this subject. That doesn't matter. What matters is that I am uh, I am with the knowledge that I am being honest about it, and I am not fooling anybody. I'm not here to trick anybody. And for me, this is enough. And when I am done with the recording and I go and publish it and I watch the video again, I know that I tried as best I could. And this is an honest representation of this moment. And if there are mistakes, which there are, I will try to learn from them. And I will try to get better. And maybe next time I won't repeat the same mistakes. Or if I do repeat the same mistakes, I will eventually come to terms with my level. I won't have a grandiose idea of who I am. I won't think that, oh, you are the real deal, you are up there, when in reality I am down here. I want to know my reality. I don't want to live in my own fantasy. And so this is why I have this alla prima method. But let me tell you about alla prima, because I haven't actually told you the inspiration. So you may know in painting there is this raw material called the oil paint. And basically it's a material that is moist, and the way it is used is that it is applied on a surface, typically canvas, and it is left to dry. And depending on the prevailing conditions, it may take overnight for it to dry or something like that. But the way the painter will work with the paint is that they will apply a layer of oil color, let it dry, and then come back the next day, apply more color on top, and repeat until the work of art is done. This is one way of doing things. Another way of doing things is what is known as alla prima, which is an Italian expression meaning at once or in one go. And the translation in English is wet on wet, referring to the technique of applying color while the color is still wet. It hasn't dried out yet. So you are working with the canvas and you have applied color and you continue applying color. And the work of art is done once the thing is dry. And you don't put color on top. This is the idea. And one way to understand how this works in practice is, let's say that you are a painter and now you're like, okay, I want to do some landscape painting. And you sit here outside the hut and you're like, oh, look at this mountain, this valley, let me paint it. And you set your tripod and you have your canvas over here and all the paints, and you're like, fantastic, now let me start painting. And so you are observing this and you are painting, and if you want to do an impression of this, if you want to have a good representation of what this is, you have to do it in one go, because the sun is setting. It won't sit there waiting for you to finish your work of art. And you won't have the chance to come here tomorrow because maybe it will be rainy, maybe it will be windy. It will be a different landscape. It will be a different piece of art. And so we can see how the circumstances, when it comes to landscape painting, can inform the technique, the method of the artwork. And I think the same can apply to cases like this. Like if we are having this exchange face to face, I don't have the option of, cutting what I say, editing it, and saying it differently. I only have the chance to say something to you right away. And for me, especially when it comes to philosophy, this is important because I think that the written word is always causing problems. It's very easy to misunderstand each other. Of course, the spoken word is also easy to misunderstand. Generally, communication is hard. But I think the written word is extra hard because you cannot sense the other person's emotional state. There is no tone there. And you might project, you might read between the lines, you might add what is not there, and thus misunderstand. So, what I like, what I want to have is philosophical exchanges that are, if not the real thing, which is face to face, at least as close to it as I can do via the video format. And for me, the closest I have thought of is basically this: alla prima. Say something and hope, trust that the other person understands that your words, word by word, are not an article of faith. It's not a godly pronouncement, and we will go through each word and see if there is the truth, the absolute truth hidden therein. That's not the point. What we want is through our exchange, through our discourse, we want to help each other understand what the subject matter is. And we will understand it each in our subjective way. And that's totally okay. What alla prima has done for me, because it is something that I apply consistently for my videos, but also for my writings. If you check my website, prodesilaos.com, you will notice that I actually publish a lot, much more than the videos actually. And the reason I can publish that much is exactly because of alla prima. It's very easy for me to sit down, write something, and basically hit publish. But if I have to sit down, write something, and say, okay, I will revise it the day after, it becomes really hard because the day after, something else will come up. I have stuff to do. Or maybe I want to write about another thing that I have in mind. So I cannot just keep pushing stuff into a backlog that I will eventually review because that will never happen. The sheer workload will be such where I will be intimidated to go back and do anything. Furthermore, I won't be in that flow. When I am doing something, I am in the flow of doing it. It's this idea of the wet on wet. When you are applying the paint, you are in that flow and you have a very clear idea of what you are doing. But if you exit that flow and you try to reconnect, you know very well that it doesn't really work. And in art, it doesn't work because the paint is now dry. And you cannot manipulate it the way, you cannot work with it the way you would have worked were it still wet. And this is the idea. We are in the flow, so we can more easily execute that which we want, and we do something and we publish it. In my case, of course, I publish, but I don't mean to say that alla prima actually requires you to publish. What alla prima requires is honesty. So you might do something, but you will keep it for your own personal archive. That's totally okay. What matters, though, is that you are not fooling yourself. What matters is that when you go back to review it, you recognize that it is a product of its time. And you say that this is who I was back then in that specific situation. And so, what this represents is basically me under those conditions. And you won't be constantly editing it, because then it's not the real you. Then it's somebody else. So what we want is to always have this authenticity in mind, this honesty in mind. And we are honest because of what I said earlier. We don't have an expectation of the outcome. We only have an expectation of the method. So when the painter will sit here to do the landscape, the painter who will do alla prima only cares about doing it alla prima. We don't know what the outcome will be. That is a separate discussion. But what we will acknowledge is that, yes, you had the courage to come here and to do it in one go and to expose all your weaknesses, all your flaws in this way. And that is honorable. That is really good, because you are not trying to fake it. You are not trying to hide anything. And implicitly, you are saying that, hey, the way to get better is to not be that good and to work on your flaws. Nobody starts out the finished article. We all start out, and we all start out in a state of being raw and amateurish, and we become better. We are refined over time. We refine our skills. And for me, it's very nice to see that process and to appreciate it for what it is. Because then you know that you are dealing with a real person. And you are like, okay, I can see that this is an actual person, and this is not some manufactured, some highly editorialized picture of a person to whom I cannot relate. Because this is Mr. Perfect, and I am not perfect. Right? And so when you cannot relate to somebody, it's also easier to do two things, which I think are mistreatment, but in a different way. One is to treat that person as basically a god. So to have a cult towards that person, a cult of personality, which I think is a mistreatment, but we will go into that. And the other is to basically dehumanize that person and not understand that they are flawed. So if they say something which you don't agree with, you go into full obliteration mode. And you don't do what you would have done in a face to face exchange, where you would be more understanding, more compassionate. And you would acknowledge that this person in front of me makes mistakes the way I do, and I will cut this person some slack. So I think both of those, the dehumanization but also the deification, are mistreatment, because both do not apply to an actual person. Whether you are dehumanizing or deifying someone, you are no longer talking about a real person. And so if you deify someone, why is that a mistreatment? It is a mistreatment because now your expectations of their moral character, of their ability to perform, etc., are so high that the moment they deviate from your expected standard, you are like, oh, I thought you were better. You did not live up to the standard I had for you. You have fallen from grace. And it is also mistreatment because you are imposing that standard on the person. And so that person has to live up to it, right? And that is not sustainable. The godly standard. So this is the idea, folks. Alla prima, for me, is about doing things spontaneously. It is about having a general idea of what I want to elaborate on, but then also having the joy of discovery. Because, like in this video, if I were to record this 3 times, it would be 3 different videos with 3 different narratives, with quite probably 3 different sets of topics. And it would also be 3 different patterns of body talk, body language, of my mannerisms. These are also something that are discovered in the process. I cannot choreograph all this. I don't know how to dance, by the way, besides, moving my body, but I mean, dance professional. So, of course, don't expect me to choreograph all this. It is discovery. It happens in the moment. And then when I look back, I'm like, wow, look at that. Isn't that interesting? And so it's spontaneous, it's authentic, and because the standard is further down, it's also relaxing. Yet, there is an element of competitiveness to it as well. Competitiveness, not in the sense of me trying to outdo another person, no. Competitiveness in the sense of me trying to do good, trying to live up to a standard and trying to push myself a little bit to do a bit better. This is the idea. And so, if there is a mistake, which there was, if there is a mistake in the video, I will be like, okay, next time I will try harder. This is the idea of competitiveness. Competitiveness. But it is not competitiveness of a toxic sort. Like, unless you are impeccable, you are useless. No. You try as best you can, and we recognize you for your efforts. This is the idea that I have in my mind. And so I am not harsh on myself. I am not cruel towards myself. And this is the final point, which is how we treat people. Instinctively, we tend to cut others some slack. We tend to be compassionate. Of course, different people, different levels of compassion and how they deal with others, but generally speaking, when you are dealing with another person, another real person, not that cult of personality or dehumanized, but another person face to face, you will show some degree of understanding. You won't expect them to be perfect. But this kind of compassion is something that we may not show towards ourselves. So we have this kind of double standard where for everybody else, we expect them to be okay and to make mistakes. But when we apply a standard to ourselves, we have this godly standard and we are like, you are not allowed to make mistakes. And this is cruel because we are not compassionate to a certain person, our person. And so, with alla prima, what I am doing is everything I told you about, being spontaneous, being authentic, having this element of competitiveness in what I am doing, but also being kind to myself. Being kind to myself, allowing myself to make mistakes, allowing myself to improve through trial and error, and not being too harsh on myself about this fact, the fact of my nature as a human being. And this is the idea, folks, alla prima, a method that I have been applying for many, many years now, and a method that I find really nice, really good for me. It has improved my mental state. I am very creative, very productive, and also content with what I am doing, and at peace with who I am. And so, as I said, even though I don't have what I consider the best way to do philosophy, which is face to face, even though I have the second best, I think, which is a video like this, where you get the closest thing to a face to face exchange. And who knows? The world is small. This may also be a face to face exchange one day. That's all for today, folks. Thank you very much for your attention. Take care and goodbye for now, and always take it easy. Bye bye.